Hey guys, Matthew here, and a few days ago on my YouTube channel, I made a community post regarding the fact that I was going to start making a bunch of very short videos about different methods of making currency in a league start scenario, right? Because after I made my video regarding how me and my duo made like 200x in the first weekend of the league, people started asking me, it's one thing to say that you farmed this and that, but how did you get started, right? Where did the currency come initially? And I said I was going to make videos regarding exactly that. So the strategy that I have for you guys today is called endless heisting, and the idea is very simple. We are going to take advantage of the way that heist works, right? The way that acquiring contracts works early in the game. To basically get infinite amount of heist contracts for extremely cheap. Not only that, we're going to be able to pick and choose which one of the contracts we want to run, and we are also going to be able to farm potentially hundreds of reveals, and also even better, not just reveals, but discount reveals as well. So the idea behind the strategy is that we want to start working and setting up our heist as in our rogues and whatnot as fast as possible so that we can start doing grand heist after like the first day of a league or the second day of a league, right? So this is going to be a strategy which is going to be short-lived, but while it's there, it's extremely good. So before we get into the actual strategy, there's a few things I need to talk about. Um, First off is going to be which one of the rogues that you actually care about, and of course why you care about them. And then I want to talk about reveals because that's going to play a massive portion, a massive uh, amount into the actual strategy itself. All right, so in terms of the rogues and which ones are the best and whatnot, so agility is not bad in a league start scenario. Um, because you do have currency drops. Essences are not going to be great in these low level contracts. Fossils are not going to be great, but you have currency and you also have Harbinger, which can be pretty decent. So I would say agility is not the worst. Brute force is very short lived. It's not going to be good for very long, but in a league start scenario, uniques are typically very expensive. So even like one out uniques or one C uniques can be multiple chaos because nobody has availability of these different uniques. So this literally spits out uniques like crazy, so it's not too bad, but it doesn't stay very good. Literally on the second day of a league, all those one out uniques are right back down to one out. They're no longer a few chaos, and it's no longer going to be worth it. But you still want to do it like from the very beginning. Otherwise, we're going to be skipping brute force if you're not somebody who's fast at getting to maps. Counter thaumaturgy is not bad. Niles is definitely the one that we're going to be focusing on here, and we are going to get a lot of currency, which is good, and also jewelry. Now, jewelry doesn't sound like it's great, but the thing is you can do the chaos recipe, and one of the, well, the only bottleneck for chaos recipe is the amount of jewelry that you get. By doing counter thaumaturgy, you're going to get a truckload of jewelry, way more than you could ever use for your own chaos recipe. And actually, chaos recipe is going to be a pretty good amount of currency, especially in a league start scenario. From Deception, we're obviously going to be using Gianna. That's where we're going to get a lot of our blueprint reveals. And of course, we are going to get div cards, which is massive, and also Harbinger is pretty good. But div cards is the biggest reason, and why div cards is for the stacked decks, right? It's mostly going to be stacked decks. Demolition is going to be our go-to for Vindari. Now, the biggest reason for that is because obviously we want to focus on Vindari for the chance to duplicate chests, which is huge. But the other reason why Demolition isn't so bad is because there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. There's Blight, which can drop you oils. Even some pretty low-tier oils are worth a decent amount in a league start scenario. There's Metamorph, same thing with Catalyst, right? They just don't exist, so they all have value. And then Delirium, they removed the Delirium Orbs, so you can't get Delirium Orbs anymore, but you can still get Cluster Jewels. And because you're doing 50 plus on the heist, right? You're going to be doing, matter of fact, 60 plus. A lot of these Delirium Cluster Jewels, if they have the right amount of passes and the right mods, are actually going to be pretty expensive bases, right? It doesn't take something to be too expensive to be very worth it in a league start scenario. Engineering is overall just kind of trash. It's the same thing as brute force. It's a hard skip. You don't want to be doing engineering ones at all. But you do kind of want to do them for the uniques early. Now, the problem with essences is that you're doing contracts that are too low tier, so they're not even really going to give you good essences, matter of fact. And also, nobody really cares about essences early, and maps have been gutted from Heist, so they're not very good anymore. Lockpicking is obviously going to be your go-to. That's going to be your main priority by far because of currency, because of accessories, and because Karst is actually really fast at doing what he does, right? He can open a lot of boxes in his contracts, and he is very quick compared to something like agility, for example. All right, perception is going to be Nanette's. Now, the reason why we care about perception is obviously because of the div cards, which is basically stacked decks, and prophecies. Prophecies are actually not that bad. And the reason for that is because obviously they could give you something like, the Iron Bard, or not the Iron Bard, I mean like Faded Connections, or even, Jeweler's Touch, or, Trash to Treasure, right? It can give you a lot of different stuff. And that can be quite good. Even Faded Uniques Prophecies can be worth a good amount, and they're super, super common. So that's why we are going to want to focus on Nanette. So this is not going to be a guide on how to gear your rogues or anything like that, because I want this video to be pretty short. I just wanted to basically talk to you guys about which ones of the contracts, in my opinion, are skippable. So obviously Brute Force, Engineering, and Trap Disarmament, in my opinions, are the ones that you could absolutely just not touch whatsoever. You might need to level the rogues at some point, but overall, I would say that these are just not worth the time investment. And because of the way that the strategy is set up, you should never it should never be an issue, the fact that you don't want to run these different contracts. So let's talk about the strategy now that I've went over the actual heist cheat sheet. This is going to be linked in the description of the video. Let's talk about one of the most important thing about the strategy, which is going to be unlocking reveals. So one thing to note about reveals is that you can only get reveals when you're doing level 68 or higher contracts. But you can also get reveal if you're doing less than level 68 contracts, but only if your character is within 3 levels of the actual contract level. What that means is that, for example, a level 70 character can get a reveal from a level 67 contract, but a level 71 character will not. Now, if we hop into the game right now and we go to Wakako, you'll see that if you purchase items, he has a bunch of different contracts of, different people. Demolition, Deception, whatever, right? And then you could have the cheat sheet and know exactly which ones are worth and which ones are going to be the ones that you're going to be skipping. And you'll want to buy all the ones that you want to run. Now, the thing is, these are level 67, which means exactly this. If you want to be able to get reveals from them, your character will have to be no higher than level 70. Now, the problem with your character being no higher than level 70 is that you're probably going to be pretty weak, and gearing up might be pretty hard, considering Heist is not that easy. But here's a cheat, a little bit of a cheat, if you want to call it that. One thing that's interesting about Heist is that you don't need to be in maps to heist, right? Heisting will be available from the start of Act 6. So what that means is that you actually don't need to kill Kitava. And if you just don't kill Kitava in Act 10 before you start heisting these level 67 contracts, matter of fact, you can actually, level in Heist up to level 67 if you're not 67 by the time you get to Act 10 Kitava. By skipping Act 10 Kitava, you're not going to get the reduction of 30% of all elemental resistances, which means that it's going to be significantly easier to gear your character, and you're going to be able to focus a lot more on move speed, for example, than things like defenses and resistance on your gear, which should allow you to run these contracts as fast as possible. Remember, these contracts are all about going as quick as you possibly can to get, to run as many as possible in a given time. So one thing to note here, and why this strategy is so interesting, is that if I was to buy all these contracts, right? Let's just say I buy all of them, and they're basically one Chancellor, which is 1/4 of a Scour, and Scourings are like 2 for a Chaos or so in a League Start scenario. So we are looking at, these are basically free. Quite frankly, free. If I want to get reveals, I have to be no more than level 70. But if I just keep heisting, I'm going to get XP, right? And you get a lot of XP in heist. So you're going to get too much XP. You're going to go past level 70, and that's going to be a problem. And this is where this little trick comes in. If you vendor a Scroll of Wisdom alongside a Orb of Scouring, right, you can actually get this thing called a Book of Regression. And what this allows you to do is to de-level your character. And one thing that's really interesting about these contracts is that the entire shop will reset when you level up, but also when you level down. And if you're staying within level, let's say 67, 68 on your character, this will mean that you are going to get a ton of XP. Like, literally, not even 10 of these contracts will be required for you to get a full level. Maybe even like 6 or 8 contracts will be required. So what that allows you to do is to focus on just the best contracts, the one that I listed at the beginning of the video. Once you have bought the best ones and you leave the ones that are not good, right, then you'll focus on getting an extra, getting a level, right, leveling up from these contracts. If you don't quite get the level up, you can easily go finish that level up in Blood Aqueducts. And then when you level up, you go back to Wakako, you buy the good contracts again, and then you de-level yourself with the Book of Regression. And this allows you to, again, re-buy contracts. And by having 2 full sets of contracts available to you every single time you level up and therefore level down, you should be able to run only the best contracts, like only things like lockpicking, and deception and perception and all that, right? Only the very best contracts, infinitely for the cost of 1 chance orb and 1 scour once in a while. It's actually an insane strategy, but there is a downside to the strategy. If you're not killing Kitava, that means that you're going to be missing some skill points, but what it also means that you're not going to be doing any sort of progression on your Atlas, which means no progression on your Cyrus questline, no progression on your Maven questline. But if you really like heisting, this is probably one of the best strategies in a league start scenario I could ever imagine, because it allows you to level all your rogues up to maximum, level 5, get literally 100 plus reveal easily, extremely easily, because of the speed at which you run these contracts. I'm just going to go ahead and buy one and show you guys what it looks like real quick. So
Hello.
The way that you run these contracts is you talk to her, and you're going to run these contracts white. You don't want to put anything on them, no alks, no transmutes, nothing. You just run them white. And the only thing that you're doing is you're trying to run them as fast as humanly possible. Go in, go out, right? So we want to prioritize the big chests.
Ask me why I do this.
And other than the big chests, we're going to basically finish up the alert level with a bunch of small chests. So what I do is I'll basically run through, open up as many small chests as I can, and then I'll pay attention to which ones are the big chests, and I'll make sure that I get those, because the big chests are going to be the majority of your money. But another thing is Chaos Recipe, right? One thing about heisting is that it drops an insane amount of jewelry. It actually drops a ridiculous amount of jewelry, which makes you be able to do the Chaos Recipe faster than like anybody else in the entire game. It's really, really insane how much you get from this. So one thing about this is that you do want to basically finish these contracts, because if you don't finish the contracts, you may get into a situation where you run out of rogue markers. So you do want to get to the end and actually do it. But if you have a little bit of a leeway on your rogue markers, for example, right now I have 14,000. By the way, this is a pretty decent method of actually farming rogue markers. You do get a decent amount of them. If you have some leeway and the ending of the room, right, the last room is too far away, you can just say, I'm just gonna skip the last room, right? I'm just gonna skip it entirely, and then I'll move on. And just basically try to end this before, the whole lockdown thing even happens, because then the loot is literally free, right? And it all comes down to how fast you can run the contracts. That's what's going to dictate how much money you're making, is how fast you can run these contracts. But as you can see, it's like a minute or 2 per contract, depending on your build. It's insanely fast. And look, all I had to do was I paid 1 chance orb for this. That's it, right? 1 chance orb. And in like a minute, I made 2 chaos. I made a scouring. I made 2 val orbs, a regal, and a regret. Right? Like, the amount of currency you're going to make in a league start scenario is insane. And then pair that up with unidentified chaos recipe, giving you 2 chaos per set of items, which is extremely easy to do because of the amount of rares that are dropping in Heist. And you are looking at a strategy which I think is no less than at least 4 to 5x per hour. And not only that, it's a perfect setup for when you start grand heisting, which is probably even more currency than that, because at that point you'll be doing things like, of course, alternate quality gems and replica uniques and all that. So anyways, that's pretty much my that's pretty much my first strategy of the early game strategies that I wanted to talk about. I'm gonna be basically making a video on the next one soon-ish. But before I go, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Jordan, Fruit Fly, Thomas, Naroth, Master Tim, Nate, Jacob, Flame Scorpion, Reese, Emma, Road to Millions, Alex, Brandon, Don, Joseph, Welcome Back, Panda, Atticus, Scott, Bard, Grimoire, and Johnny, as well as, of course, Ronald, Kevin, Mercury, Bitizen, anybody else who's supported me in the past, or anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.